Okay, here we go for, I'm not sure how many times I've recorded this video, but welcome to part 1 of the digestive system lecture for Anatomy and Physiology 2. All right, so you can divide the digestive system into 2 sets of organs. You have the GI tract organs, which is a tube inside of you that's 5 to 7 meters long, 30 to 40-ish feet, okay? That tube officially begins like the tube part itself in the esophagus, but the entrance is the oral cavity, so the oropharynx into your esophagus, right here, then down into your stomach. Then it enters the small intestine, which I can't follow with the little red dot. Eventually ends up in the large intestine, makes its way around and out. Okay, so those are the GI tract organs. Then you have 6 accessory organs. There are 3 accessory organs in and around the mouth, okay, or types, classifications of organs. You have 6 salivary glands. There are parotid, submandibular, and sublingual, right? You also have your teeth and your tongue. Down below, there are 3 accessory organs that secrete products and fluids into the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. That is this pancreas here, which looks like this tadpole thing. It secretes pancreatic juice into the duodenum. Then you have the liver itself, which creates bile. That bile either directly enters into the small intestine or backs up into the gallbladder, which is really kind of hard to see in this image, where it's concentrated and then can be secreted into the small intestine. Okay, so those are the main organs. There. And what I just said is there. Moving on. Okay, so GI tract activities or functions. Okay.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Before we, I hope it didn't stop recording. All right, well, we're gonna keep going on. Canvas did something weird there. I hope it didn't disconnect. I guess we'll find out when you guys watch this video. Okay. So moving on to the functions or activity of the GI tract. GI tract can't do anything until we put something in our face. So the first is ingestion. We have to actually take something in, either fluids or food in, okay? Obviously, digestion is an important function of the digestive tract. There are 2 types of digestion, mechanical and chemical. Mechanical digestion is the physical breaking apart of food, okay? Most physical or mechanical digestion occurs in the mouth with your teeth tearing apart and chewing, all right? And then your stomach is a second most important organ, or also as important as the mouth for mechanical digestion with churning, which we'll go over in part 2, I believe. And then there's some segmentation, which also moves the food stuff around, which is called chyme in the small intestine, okay? Chemical digestion is literally breaking down the chemicals in what you've consumed, okay? So it's either pH that denatures proteins or enzymes that break down one of the 4 main macromolecules, lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids. Okay, so the food stuff that you take in or the food you take in has to be moved. So propulsion is another big one, all right? So we have to be able to swallow the food. That's involving multiple things we'll go over in a few moments. Peristalsis is a type of muscle contraction that's like almost in a wave to help propel food forward along the tube. And those are the 2 main things. There's a couple other specific types of peristalsis, etc., that we'll go over later. All right. Absorption. So we've taken the time to get it in. We're moving the food along. We're breaking it down chemically and mechanically. And it won't do anything for us unless we absorb it. So then absorption is coming in, taking that food stuff we've digested to small enough pieces, and either absorbing it into the bloodstream or into the lymphatic system. Most of the breakdown products of digestion are absorbed into the blood and then go to the liver. Only the smaller fatty acids go into blood, okay? But most of the lipids actually go in the lymphatic system. All right, finally, waste removal, defecation is another function. There's one that's not on here that I'm going to add, and that is secretion. Is another important function. About 7 liters or so of fluid a day are secreted into the GI tract itself by the body. Okay, these secretions contain acid, buffers, enzymes, water. Okay, to aid in this whole process. Change the font size here. Oop, that's kind of big. Make something fun. All right. So here are the words of what I've just said. Okay, functions of the GI tract. 1, ingestion. 2, secretion. Who is doing the secreting? One you should already know. That is the accessory organs. I guess I made the font. I'll try that again. All right, you can laugh with me. It's fine. All right, and the other is the tract lining itself. All right, so mixing and propulsion, pretty important. Mixing is moving the food substances around in and around the fluids with the enzymes to help break down the food chemically. Okay, that's done by how contraction's controlled. Motility is a key component here, and that is defined as mixing and propulsion of the food. Oh no. Oh, it's safe. Okay, good. Okay, so those are 1, 2, and 3. And number 4 is missing. So let's go ahead and add number 4. So 1, 2, and 3 were ingestion, secretion, and then mixing and propulsion. 5 and 6 are absorption, defecation. What are we missing? I have an important function. Digestion. Kind of important. Digestion is the breaking apart of particles. Okay, and of course there are 2 types. Which are what? And mechanical. We have absorption. All right, the epithelial cells that line the tract help absorb the stuff, and then we poop out the stuff we don't want. That's indigestible. Some waste go in there from bile. Okay, and leave as feces. All right, to the layers. So in lab, we went over the 4 layers. We're going to do it again in here because these 4 layers and what's happening in each one and how it changes based on where you are in the tube of the GI tract are really important. Okay, so the 4 layers of the GI tract, starting from the lumen, which is where the food stuff is, are the mucosa layer. Mucosa, this is the outer layer, the layer that faces the lumen. Next layer out is the submucosa here. Word is right there. Okay. Then you have the muscularis here and the serosa. So let's detail a little bit more about the mucosal layer. So the mucosal layer is lined by epithelium because it's facing a lumen, and thus epithelial tissue form the coverings and linings of the body. Okay. The type of epithelial tissue that's there will be dictated by what function that part of the tube has. For example, if absorption is occurring, do you think we have a stratified epithelium there? No, it'll be simple. Okay. In places where there's potential for wear and tear, you have a stratified epithelium. Okay. The next layer is the lamina propria. There's some green things here. That's usually indicative of lymphatic tissue. So those are some malt. Could be the Peyer's patches in the small intestine, for example. And then there's a little layer of smooth muscle here called the muscularis mucosae. This layer is not involved in motility. It doesn't move food. It doesn't propel food. It's not helping in mixing. It is literally there for surface area and changing the texture of that lumen. Okay. All right, so that's the mucosa. Then we're moving on to the submucosal layer. That's here. This is where the secreting portions of glands are. There's a lot of glands here. And of course, those glands, the ducts of those pass through the mucosa to empty into the lumen. But the parts are here. Okay. There's also this yellow stuff here, which if it doesn't look like fat, is usually nervous tissue, right? So this is called the submucosal plexus. Do you guys recall the enteric nervous system, which is part of the peripheral nervous system that we discussed in AMP1? The enteric system is the brain of the gut, and there are two plexuses. Submucosal plexus is one of them. It innervates, remember that's what nerves talk to, the submucosa of the GI tract, and then controls secretions because that's where glands are. Then the other layer we'll get to in a minute is the myenteric plexus, okay, which we'll do now. So then we have the muscularis is the next layer. So mucosa, submucosa, muscularis. Okay, it's almost exclusively smooth muscle. It's involuntary, except for the ends, the external anal sphincter, and the upper portion of the esophagus is also skeletal muscle. You have control when you swallow. Everywhere else it's smooth muscle, and most of the time there are two layers. An inner layer arranged circularly. See if I can draw. Okay, so these are arranged this way. I drew over this submucosa, but you'll forgive me. Okay, so when they squeeze, it's analogous to when a blood vessel squeezes, right? It's going to make the lumen smaller in that location, right? Then there's an outer longitudinal layer that they're arranged this way. So when these contract, they're going to actually shorten the tube itself, okay, if you can imagine that. And if I could draw better to illustrate that, I would, but you guys know my artistic talent, or the lack of it. Okay, so in this region, we also have the myenteric plexus, which is the second plexus of the enteric nervous system. These nerves innervate here, and then, of course, they're going to control motility of the GI tract. Finally, you have the serosa, which is everywhere along the tract except for the esophagus, which has an adventitia. Okay, so this has some connective tissue wrapped in epithelium. It's just the encapsulation of the organ itself. It also is where the pathway for blood vessels, nerves, lymphatic tissue, etc., come in. All right, and here's it showing the mesentery, which we know now is an organ, not just a connective tissue pathway for stuff. All right. So here are most of the details that we discussed. Okay, a few little things to add here. In the mucosa, the epithelial tissue there can have different functions. It can function in protection. Oops. If it's a stratified epithelium, but it's not always. Secretion, things like mucus. Okay, and of course, absorption, pretty important. Muscularis mucosae there is that thin layer of smooth muscle that makes folds to most often increase surface area. And why do we want to do that and where? Increase absorption ability in the small intestine. Okay, submucosa, everything is covered. And the muscularis. Okay, so it's telling you that the most of the places are smooth muscle. There's a few places where there's voluntary skeletal muscle. The muscle fibers themselves are arranged in an inner circularly arranged fibers. So these are circular. Outer longitudinal. I'm going to write longitudinal up here. Just give it a bit. You have your serosa, which outlines the rest, except for esophagus. Okay. So now let's talk about the nervous innervation of the GI tract. All right, so I've already highlighted this. The enteric nervous system is the brain of the gut. It's part of the peripheral nervous system and the ANS. It's an intrinsic set of nerves, which means it's within. It monitors what's happening in the GI tract and can send feedback to itself to control the function there. What do you think are going to be the triggers for activating this ENT? What would ENS? What would activate this nervous system? Chemical. Maybe there's chemoreceptors to sense the food, and there are going to be stress receptors to sense the content that's being stretched when food is there, okay? I already told you that there are two plexuses, myenteric and submucosal. The myenteric plexus controls what? GI tract motility. Which basically is determining which smooth muscles of fibers of which layers are contracting, how hard and when. Then you have the submucosal plexus. This controls secretions. Okay. Submucosal plexus, the motor neurons are doing the stimulating of the glands to secrete, right? Motor neurons tell things what to do, muscle to contract, or glands to squirt. Then there are sensory neurons there with the receptors I mentioned before, the chemoreceptors and stress receptors that sense when food is there to then trigger secretions and the proper GI tract motility for where it is in the tube. Okay. So then there's an extrinsic set of nerves, which is the ANS itself. Okay. Hopefully by now you remember the roles of parasympathetic and sympathetic with regards to the GI tract. Okay, so finish the statement. Parasympathetic stimulation does what to secretion and activity of the GI tract? Will parasympathetic stimulation increase or decrease activity? Increase. So increases goes here. For sympathetic stimulation is going to decrease. Okay. So the intrinsic set of nerves in the ENS, the enteric nervous system, can take care of business most of the time, but it will listen to the ANS based on globally what's happening in the body, which is why it's not a good idea to eat a big meal and then go exercise. Not so bueno. All right. So now we're going to look at the 3 accessory glands of the mouth, starting with the salivary glands. Okay. Salivary glands, their function when there's no food around are to secrete saliva at basal level to help wash the surface of the mouth. So it has sort of a first line of defense immune function there. Okay, when food is there though, those secretions change. Okay, they contain an enzyme called salivary amylase, which breaks down starch. Okay, it's the first chemical digestion that occurs in digestion. It also helps lubricate to facilitate maneuvering of the food while you're chewing to form a bolus to swallow. Okay, and there are 3 classes of salivary glands. You have the parotid here, the submandibular, and the sublingual, all of which make different types of saliva that contain different things in it. Okay, also salivation can occur when food is present or even before food is present. There's 3 phases of digestion you're going to hear about later. The first is cephalic. If you think about food, like right now, think about your favorite Thanksgiving dish. The pumpkin pie with whipped cream on it. Is it the cornbread stuffing with sausage in it? Is it the rotisserie turkey? I'm telling you all the things that I love. And now my mouth is watering, and probably so is yours. Sorry about that. Hope you have some snacks nearby. Okay, you actually prepare your body for digestion before the food even hits when you think or see or smell food. Okay, tongue, not much mystery about what it does. It helps to maneuver the food. It lifts up to push the bolus of food back to begin deglutition or swallowing. Okay, there are some lingual glands which are located here. They secrete a substance that contains lingual lipase. Okay, lingual means from the tongue, and lipase is an enzyme that breaks down triglycerides into fatty acid and a diglyceride. Okay, we'll talk about this in a minute, but that lingual lipase doesn't touch the fats in your mouth. It gets activated in the stomach. Don't ask me why. There are multiple lipases that are secreted in one place and they get activated in the next. Why that happens, I'm not sure. It's just to frustrate you, I'm sure. Okay. The tongue also has those little bumpy things. Those are called papillae. That's when the lamina propria, remember that's the second layer, bumps up. Okay. And often those contain taste buds, which are, pretty important to me. I'm not sure about you. All right. Teeth. Not much new to say here that we didn't say in lab. Hardest bone for obvious reasons. It's exposed to lots of physical and chemical stress. All right. We didn't say there are 2 dentitions. So dentitions are teeth sets. You already know you had baby teeth, pointy teeth, which are called your deciduous teeth. And you have permanent teeth 38. And here's a fun x-ray showing of a young individual, a kid, with their deciduous teeth here, and then their permanent adult teeth coming in behind. That's when you lose all those fun teeth during childhood. Okay, so now we're going to talk about digestion in each part of the tract. What's happening there, who is playing a role in there, both mechanically and chemically, if appropriate. Okay, so in the mouth, mechanical digestion begins, right? You guys already know mastication and chewing. You're using your teeth and your tongue, and the saliva is mixing together as you chew your food until you form what's called a bolus. Okay, bolus is the thing that you swallow. All right, chemical digestion in the mouth. Only carbohydrates begin to break down chemically in the mouth via salivary amylase. Okay, it acts on starches. Starch is a polysaccharide of glucose, which is monosaccharide. And so as amylase is in there, if you take something that's starchy and you chew it for a long time, like 5 minutes, which it feels really gross to do, but try it anyhow. After a while, it starts to taste sweet. And I have no way to pause this. So you guys just hang for a second. I have to answer a tow truck. All right, sorry guys. Multitasking, yay. All right, lingual lipase, I already told you, breaks down triglycerides into fatty acids. Oh, maybe I can spell it correctly. It's not active until it gets to the stomach. So the low pH in the stomach actually changes the conformation of the lingual lipase, and then it's able to actually bind triglycerides and break them down. Pretty cool. Okay, esophagus. Not much is happening except for transportation of food and secretion of mucus. So it transports bolus or liquid, and also secretes mucus. Mucus is there, of course, to lubricate. All right, no enzymes are secreted. The only digestion that's occurring is just the amylase that's still active, which, by the way, is deactivated in the stomach. No absorption. The mucosa is stratified squamous to protect against wear and tear. You don't want to bleed when you swallow. The muscularis is unique in that there's a mix of skeletal and smooth. So at the top, skeletal, because you can control swallowing and also can push things back out if you need to, if you start to choke. Middle third is a mix, bottom third is that. There are two sphincters, the upper esophageal sphincter, rigorous movement into the esophagus itself, and the lower esophageal sphincter into the stomach. The sphincter is a circularly arranged set of muscles that control movement from one place to another. In this case, from the oropharynx to the esophagus, or the esophagus into the stomach. And recall, there's no serosa, there's just adventitia. All right, so here's some histology showing you. Here's the cross section, which you can look at. Here's really the main thing to highlight. The mucosal modification is that there's stratified squamous here. So you can see this is the basal layer of the epithelium. All right. And over here, depending on where we are, this looks like it's smooth at this location, but it might be, it'll be skeletal or a mix of skeletal and smooth, depending on what location in the esophagus you're looking at the muscular area. Okay, what is deglutition? That's the act of swallowing. That, of course, is helped by mucus in the esophagus itself and your saliva. all right, involves, this is kind of a duh, the mouth, the throat, pharynx, and the esophagus. And there are 3 stages. Voluntary is when the bolus is passed into, where do you guess? Oropharynx. Okay. And then you have the pharyngeal and esophageal stage. The pharyngeal stage is the involuntary passage through the pharynx into the, where? Next, esophagus. And then the esophageal phase is involuntary passage through the esophagus to the stomach. And that's facilitated in the lower part of the esophagus, well, the higher part too, by peristalsis. So peristalsis, we'll describe again later, but it's a type of motility that propels something towards the end of the tube, like propels it down. So imagine you have a tube in front of you that's kind of pliable. You put your finger around, making a circle around one part of the tube, you squeeze it, and then you pull your squeezed finger down the tube. Whatever would be inside the tube is being propelled forward. That's very much like peristalsis, except for instead of being one finger moving it down, there's like a series of circular muscle fibers that contract in sort of a cascade motion, or like they're doing the wave. So one ring contracts, the next one does, next one does, next one does. And so they just kind of pass that contraction down like they're all doing the wave, but instead of the wave, they're all just sitting down, squeezing to push the bolus of food forward. And the next part 2 will continue this. I really hope this sounds okay and you guys can hear it. Have a blessed, blessed day.